Lower Decks is a Star Trek animated comedy show featuring a cast of characters lower in the command chain set on the USS Doritos. I'm sorry, that's USS Cerritos. Now, after seeing initial previews, it looked as if a studio executive's whiteboard with the words, "How can we make Star Trek hip?" just sprung to life and morphed into a series. It ticked every box going for desperately trying to rebrand Star Trek into something it was never meant to be. It didn't help the show's case being announced right around the time that the fatigue was setting in for these type of shows, everyone getting tired of Rick and Morty and, its type of comedy and all these animated series being very similar to each other around the same time.
Let's go, in and out, 20 minutes adventure.
And Star Trek is not known for that kind of comedy, so it was already on a bad footing. It felt like a show desperately trying to copy every popular thing that was currently airing on TV and on streaming, just hoping that something sticks, something, whatever they've thrown against the wall, one thing will stick and they can finally have that popular show for Star Trek that they've been wanting for ages, with the failures of Discovery and Picard not living up to the hype. They really needed a win, and they thought that by basically making a show that's an amalgamation of everything that popular at that time, that they could finally get a win. But using Star Trek in this way was probably the worst idea they could have gone through. Even an original series, animated series, would have done better than branding it as a Star Trek show. And for a while, it honestly looked like the show was going to be cancelled by the sheer negative feedback the trailers got when it first released. After which, the entire show just went dark for a couple of months. You didn't hear anything, you didn't see any kind of previews. Honestly, a lot of people just thought it was cancelled, and then suddenly it's out. And when it released, I quickly forgot about it because CBS have these weird issues when it comes to releasing things, and you're never sure if you can actually see something or if it's going to be released in your country or not. But I recently saw it pop up on Netflix, and having absolutely nothing better to do, with my time nowadays, I thought, why not? Why not give it a shot? At least see if it's good, because I still like Star Trek, even if absolutely everything coming out of it is absolute garbage. I never want to see it again. I'm still holding out that tiny bit of hope. That nostalgia connection is so hard to break. Hoping that one day we'll get something good. And if it comes in an animated form, fine. We had the TOS animated series.
There's something wrong about this room. All right, Winston, you can come out now. I suggest you show yourselves, Winston, or whatever you are.
Did you say I'm a man of curious habits? Jim's talking to a table.
I don't think so, Doctor.
There used to be only 2 examining tables in this room. Now there are 3.
Why can't we do a proper, and side shows are where creators get to kind of break the rules a little. CBS, they push hard on their Discovery and their Picard, but it's like, if you make a side animated show, maybe the creators have more freedom, maybe they're more Trekky than, the standard action and death and darkness that they're going with in the main series, and they can really, go for something that's more like classic Trek. Maybe it could be like a diamond in the rough, it just needed a chance, so I thought, give it a shot. Star Trek Lower Decks has a real big problem. Its cast never shuts the fuck up. It's not just a petty complaint either. Not only does it consistently drag the show's thin runtime into sharp focus, it's also incredibly unfunny. No joking, I was ready to give up on this show after the first episode. It's sensory overload levels of just noise. Honestly, it gave me a headache. It's like the equivalent of being stuck on a plane with a woman and a screaming baby. The entire trip, she's not looking after it or paying attention, it just screams. That's what Lower Decks feels like sometimes. Noise. It was so overloading, it was becoming almost nauseating. They were just constantly having to yell and scream and make noise and talk at 100 miles an hour, and it was nothing. It had no substance. It was just filler. It was just filling time with noise. I actually had to take a break because the sensory overload was getting so bad, and I've never had to do that except once, when watching the ending of Batman vs Superman, where there was so much noise on screen and loudness, and it was overloading. I had to actually walk out the cinema because it was just frying my brain, and this is what it was like watching Lower Decks episode 1. I mean, I don't know who decided that a lot of modern comedy should just be characters screaming constantly at 100 miles an hour, but it's not good for people with autism and sensory issues. For real, stop it. It's not even funny, it's just noise. Setting aside the terribly unfunny humour for a moment, what's the story like? Well, it tells it episodically, which is the best option for a show like this. It's, classic Star Trek. There is a season-long kind of arc for certain characters, but in general it's episodic in nature. And I do give minor props for avoiding the temptation to make it a season-long plot like most of these shows like Picard is doing, because their plots are already wafer thin. Stretching out to the entire season just puts it on display how little creativity they actually have going in these shows. Each episode usually features the cast of ensigns who make up the lower decks crew, the people who do the lesser jobs on the ship. What the show does well is using the side characters of being the bridge crew, a captain, the main ship security, head doctor and so on, which could almost be seen as a main cast of their own Star Trek show going on at the same time, which often intersects with the characters' plots in the lower deck. That's all good. Even if it does get less characterization than necessary to actually, care about them as characters. And that's a big problem with a lot of the supporting cast. They have this basic makings of real characters, but never grow beyond that. They have characterization in the most basic way. But by the end of the season, beyond some extremely small expressions of interest in other crew members and stuff like that, they feel the same as they did at the start of the show, as if the writers didn't think the characters needed to grow, like they were fine just the way there was at the beginning of the season, which begs the question, why even make a story with these characters if you think they're absolutely perfect as they are? The show also has a problem of being set in the Star Trek universe, but wanting to stretch the rules of the universe to make room for more of its comedy. So at times, people act the way you expect characters in Starfleet would act, but then they would do and say things that counter that, and it's shown in a positive light, which would be counter to the reactions they got earlier, sometimes in the same episode for similar things. 1 minute, they're Starfleet, the next, they're not. Then they're Starfleet again, and then they're not. It's like the show can't decide if it wants to be Star Trek or just an animated comedy show set in space. Characters do things which will get them rightly chewed out by the higher-ups, and you think, yeah, this feels like Star Trek, I mean, they're allowed to make mistakes and be stupid and silly and stuff, because it's still a comedy, but they're still working on Star Trek, on a Starfleet vessel, so these, as long as some characters around them aren't just comedy sidekicks, someone has to be, the straight character, the straight man, as it said, to play the role of Starfleet, to show that the comedy can easily bounce off these values and stuff and work, but not when they're constantly just deciding that to throw those rules out. When they need a character to get away with something, suddenly admirals and captains will be okay with things that prior, even 20 minutes before, they were like, this will get you court-martialed. And then next minute, they're doing the exact same thing again, or the next episode, and it's, oh, that's so silly, congratulations, have a promotion. It's like, it makes no sense, and it ruins any kind of world building, because it feels so fake. I don't mind them taking liberties for the sake of jokes, but some consistency should be expected for the investment's sake. Either it's set within the rules of Starfleet, or it goes completely off the rails, but don't do both at the same time. When we're first introduced to our main characters, it begins with a barrage of shouting nonsense, and then the worst character in the show maims the okay one with a bat lift.
Color. Romulan whiskey is against regulation.
Yeah, cause it's awesome. Oh man, they got all sorts of great stuff. Oh, come on, check this out.
Be careful with that. Pretty sweet, right?
Yeah, it's a Klingon bat. Bat. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. It doesn't matter. Shut up. I got it from an old guy with an eye patch. Come spar with me. Come on. Oh, we can be Klingons. We can have crimped hair, wrinkled foreheads. War.
I love honor. I demand honor.
Yeah, that's a great introduction. Mariner almost made me want to quit watching by the end of episode 1. She's the worst aspect of every character you've ever hated, rolled into one smug ball of suffering. Now, having negative traits that make you insufferable to be around, let alone watch on screen, would be fine if the show acknowledged these as flaws that she would eventually have to work through, and you know what? At some point, it really felt like they remembered this. But then, because of the semi-episodic nature of the show, they'd forget again the next episode. She's also the character where the most discrepancy comes from. Her friend and arguably secondary main character, Boimler, is fine. He's what a Season 1 character should be and expect from a Star Trek comedy that leans more into the Star Trek themes than just random comedy that feels out of place. With most of that coming from Mariner or Tendi, the Orion medical ensign, who is there to fill the wide-eyed newcomer role, but also provide the second heaviest dose of also random humour. Mariner is constantly put on a pedestal for doing everything in the most obnoxious, I can do everything, I'm smarter than everyone around me, I've seen and done everything and always one step ahead of everyone all the way, in that way. And the show treats her as if it's amazing, and all the characters around her act like she's the best thing since sliced bread. But then she's injuring people and causing the ship to, have damage and stuff. And in Star Trek, that would not be rewarded with, wow, this person's so awesome, this person's so cool. But the show desperately wants you to feel that she's the most badass person in the world. And you can't just force that by telling the audience that, especially when her actions go directly against that. The characters who don't have to suffer as her friend think she's super cool and badass, and she almost never suffers any consequences for her actions. And even worse, spoilers, She's the daughter of the captain. You ever meet a person who got away with everything and was really smug and arrogant because their parent runs the company, but at the same time acts like life is super hard for them and has everything against them even though they have everything going for them? That's Mariner. And if it sounds insufferable for a main character, welcome to the club, but that's what watching this show is like. To highlight one of those annoying inconsistencies, in one episode she does everything that would get a Starfleet ensign thrown off the ship, but everyone treats it as cool and quirky. They even call her a badass. But then in another episode, everyone treats her as an annoying outcast, troublemaker who isn't moving up the ranks because of her self-importance and self-indulgence. And that's when you start to see what a story should be about. It's the reason why I stuck with the show to the season final, because in some episodes it feels like they finally realised these character flaws could be things she could work through, not just to be rewarded. Suddenly she was more interesting because she was getting actual reactions she would get. She's a troublemaker on a Starfleet vessel. You can do a lot with that. You can make that work, a more extreme Ensign Row, if you will, if you know anything from the TNG episode.
And the incident at Garon 2 that led to your court-martial. And I'm concerned about your presence on this delicate mission.
I don't want to be here any more than you want me to be here, sir.
Then why did you take this assignment?
If I may be equally candid, it's better than prison.
She was a troublemaking Bajoran, who did her own thing, and her trying to come to terms with her own, sense of what she thinks is right, and, rebellious attitude, and then coming onto a Starfleet ship, the flagship, and learning how to fit in and do things a certain way, but keeping her individuality at the same time. That was interesting, and they could have done something similar here. It also makes her hanging out with a group of outcasts make more sense, because she's burned out every other bridge on the ship. No one else wants to hang out with her. Boimler is another character that's focused by these changes. He's more a long-suffering kiss-ass who loves his work, loves overtime, and he's a total ensign Starfleet. And whilst that sort of dedication would have you rising through the ranks in regular Star Trek in the comedy series, he has enough flaws to where he could be ignored by the higher-ups and really fit in with the outcast characters at the same time as wanting to be an overachiever. He lacks confidence and is a bit directionless, relying on stiff practice speeches and instruction manuals. Whilst it's super basic stuff, the idea of a by-the-books, non-confident character learning to be more decisive and fluid, with the ship's troublemaker teaching him, how to be more like that, while she learns to be more by the book and make things work and care about her crew. That's basic, but it's something. It makes their friendship feel more real, and if by the gods themselves they're allowed to stop screaming and yelling and actually talk and slow down, I actually started to feel their relationship, and it felt like it was starting to work when they finally were allowed to slow down and stop yelling all the time. But instead the show flip-flops. As later episodes they go back to her being incredibly annoying, putting lives in danger, and still having everyone praise her, like the prior episode where she was chewed out and everyone thought she was a weird outcast. Didn't even happen. By the end of the season, the characters have hardly changed. All we really get is that turns out Mariner isn't a screw-up at all, but fakes it, because deep down she's actually the perfect Starfleet officer, because of course. Her flaw is being too awesome and hiding it. I mean, it's fine that she's hiding that she really does care about her ship and crew and she really does study, but it even works on a certain level because in the episode, a holographic representation of her, it's telling her that. You can't exactly, she's not lying to herself, she's confronting herself. And, that was a pretty good episode for the most part because it really, brought down her character to a more basic level where it's not just screaming and yelling and she's so awesome. But again, they couldn't have it where it's just, you're a bit of a screw up and, you're a bit spoiled, but you've got a good heart. It had to be that she's perfect at everything. She just pretends not to be. It's so over the top what they do with the character all the time. It's like she's the writer's favourite toy and they want to dress it up in all the nicest gear and they give it all, the best storylines and absolutely everything. And it's really bringing down the show because they're focusing too much on her and not enough on her as part of her crew. I mean, I even like the part, where it turns out she tells herself that she likes the warp core, which is a running joke from the beginning of the episode 1 because Boimler really likes the warp core for some reason. I guess it's just a funny joke that's kind of going through the show or something. It's not very funny, but it is a continual thing. She's always making fun of him for it. So to find out that she actually likes the warp core or she's come to like it and share his interests, it's kind of cute.
Come on, Boimler, give it a whirl.
I don't know.
Come on, there has to be somewhere you'd love to be.
Computer, show us the warp core. Wow, amazing. What an impressive feat of engineering.
Yeah! And I know you actually love the warp core! Take that back! The warp core's lame!
But the fact that she's a perfect officer, apart from not wanting more responsibility, cheapens her potential character story from learning that you're not super amazing as you think you are, and you have to work on yourself and your creator. You're just too awesome, but you have to learn how to embrace how awesome you are. It feels like there's one writer in the room desperately trying to give these characters appropriate depth and room to grow, whilst the rest just want instant satisfaction and they have to have their favourite character win no matter what, and to tell funny jokes. I'll briefly touch on the supporting characters, mainly because they don't really have much to do, and I don't really have much of an issue with them. They're shallow but serviceable. The two lower decks supporting characters are the prior mentioned Tendi and the engineer cyborg Rutherford. Well, I can't say that properly. While they don't get too much to do with the show mainly dominated by the two main leads, they do get some side stories. Tendi's bit with her genetically engineered freak dog is kind of amusing.
Oh, well then, this is starting to make a lot more sense. Freak! I know!
And what I thought would be pure cringe in Rutherford creating a killer hologram in the shape of a comm badge, which felt like the peak of creative laziness from CBS, just turning the recognizable logo of Star Trek into a character, and it actually turned out to be okay. Not great, but, okay. I like the character of Badgie. It brought a bit of craziness to the screen and served as a plot point for Rutherford wanting to impress his co-worker, and it paid off by the season final coming back, reincorporated into the main story.
I'm sorry. This is all my fault.
Here's a tip. I'm going to burn your hearts in a fire!
Leave us alone, Badgie!
No!
The cranky doctor also gets a few good lines throughout the show.
Congratulations, you look like a f***ing scratching post.
All in all, Lower Decks is an ultimately frustrating show because it has elements of things that are actually okay. There's times where it slows down, lets its characters breathe and feel more like people. The world becomes more solid as characters react appropriately to each other and lessons are learned and not everything is in service to a joke. But then there's so many episodes where all that is ignored for random humour that just doesn't land. And the constant embarrassing of the punching bag character of Boimler, who doesn't really do anything to deserve all the ire the show is giving him as a character. There are ways of telling jokes about humiliating characters every time it becomes one note because it's apparently still a funny trope to humiliate someone, to rise someone else up who's already on the peak of peaks of being amazing at everything. You don't need to bring him down, you need to rise him up. The show is also bogged down with so much Star Trek callback and references, and I know that some people enjoy that, but it got out of hand. It just felt like they were looking through Star Trek's Wikipedia to find things to pull out to, remember this? Remember this?
Revisiting planets from the TOS era.
TOS?
It's what I call the 2260s. Stands for Those Old Scientists.
I'm not a Duffy, but I haven't ruled her out as a surgically altered Cardassian spy, or a transporter clone, or, bear with me, a Suliban. Right? A Suliban?
Therapy!
I hope it's old communicators. You know, the original clamshell design?
I'm sorry I'm late. I was watching the first Enterprise on the holodeck. You know, Archer and those guys. What a story. Those guys had a long road getting from there to here.
I don't want to leave it on a completely negative note because, as I said, I did enjoy some things. So, adding to my earlier compliments, I will say the show's cast does a great job. Although their, rapid humour is grating, it's delivered well. Characters manage to talk at 100 miles an hour, shifting pitch and tone, and the cast is on point of delivering every line, even if it's not that funny. It's a hell of a performance from this cast.
Man, you disgust me. You're a coward who hides behind rank. You can't even appreciate your most valuable creative thinkers. I am Vindicta. Today you die.
This Vindicta is all over the place.
Hell is empty, and all the devils are here. Our revels now are ended.
They deliver their lines with enough self-awareness of what they're making to almost make it funny just on its delivery. I just wish they had better things to say. And that's what makes Star Trek Lower Decks a mixed bag in the end. With currently more negatives outweighing the good for me, there's still potential, but it's slim. But hey, there's plenty of Star Trek shows that had a terrible first season, but went on to do much better things. Star Trek TNG had some terrible first seasons, where they thought we really needed to know that Data's junk was fully functional.
From you, Data, you are fully functional, aren't you?
Of course, but...
How fully?
In every way, of course. I am programmed in multiple techniques. A broad variety of pleasuring.
Oh, you jewel. That's exactly what I hoped.
Nobody needed to know that. But then went on to have great seasons. Seasons, 4 is a great season. And I do hope this show finds its footing too. It slows down, it figures out its characters where they want to go. It's not just, characters don't just exist to deliver jokes. I mean, there's a character who's, I won't say really important, but is a side character. They end up dying by the end of the season. I guess that is a spoiler, but And I felt nothing because I realised this character's had like 6 lines. He's basically just a joke dispenser machine. You've got to give him a bit more than that. This isn't stand-up. You know, you've got to give him actual characterisation beyond that. I hope they let whoever wrote the better, more characterful stuff in these episodes, let them take charge. And hopefully then they can give us a show that's just as much Star Trek as it is comedy. But for now, Star Trek Lower Decks is ultimately a disappointing meh. It's not really offensive. It's, you know, it's not the destruction of Star Trek. I mean, that was already Picard and Discovery. But in general, it's just meh.
Everybody f off.